This podcast is for anyone who has ever felt stuck, whether it's a major life transition, a dark night of the soul, or just staying small out of fear. If you've ever struggled to move forward, if you're repeating unhealthy patterns in relationships, or you have a black belt in beating yourself up, you were meant for more, and this podcast is for you. We'll get real, we'll get vulnerable, we'll probably cuss a little bit, and we'll get to the root of it all, your self-worth. With every step, you'll find the courage to rise. Welcome to this week's episode of the Courage to Rise podcast. I want to talk about worthiness today, and I want to talk about why I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is the one thing that if we could heal across the entire planet would bring about peace, and I mean true, genuine peace. And the way that I came to know this is that I saw how worthiness and feelings of not being worthy and not knowing my own worth, not knowing my own value showed up in my life repeatedly. Because remember, if we don't learn the lesson, it's going to repeat itself a little bit louder and a little bit worse until we finally learn the lesson. But if that feeling of not being enough and seeing the ways that my own lack of self-worth or awareness of my own value showed up in really painful ways. And in order for any of us, someone asked me yesterday, why do people stay stuck? And one of the fundamental things that I do with my coaching practice is help people get unstuck. But underneath all of it is usually there's a core belief that you're not worthy of being unstuck. And very rarely is it a conscious thought. It's one of the true joys in my life when I am doing coaching work with clients, because the way that I approach it is I don't want to treat the symptoms. I want to give you tools, but I want to get to the heart of it, because when we get to the heart of what's causing you pain or of what is blocking you from moving forward, when we get to the heart of it, then you move forward exponentially faster and you are healed and all the other parts of your life start to come into alignment. And so it's one of the great joys for me is when we hit on and when I help bring my clients to the awareness that the biggest thing that's holding them back ultimately is their self-worth, or their feelings of not being enough and not being valued. And when I was asked once as part of my journey, because I had hit the point of suffering where I was really tired of suffering, I was really tired of being, just feeling shitty. I was tired of being in abusive, toxic, horrible relationships. Not all of them were, but I certainly had a pattern. And you get tired of it. And so you start to seek to find yourself and seek to find a better way. And a question that I was asked was, if you could give the world one gift, what would it be? And I said, self-love. Because I have seen the ways that a lack of it manifests in all of our lives and is ultimately the core root of all of the suffering in the world. And the biggest question is, where is that showing up for you? Because I know in my own journey, it was interesting because if, people told me, I came across so confident, and in some ways I was. There were some things that I was very confident about, but ultimately in my core, I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel like I was ever enough or that anything I did was ever enough. And when you have those feelings, which I'm going to let you in on a little secret, every human walking this planet feels that way and or has felt that way at some point in time. It's not just you. It's a universal thing. But when you're operating from that place of not feeling enough, you literally are walking around as an empty shell, and you're seeking to fill yourself up from other people or from other things. And, that's why we get into these cycles of draining ourselves, of working too hard in the, not in healthy ways to achieve goals, to achieve things, not for the sake of doing them, not for the sake of the pleasure of it or the joy of accomplishment, but because we're trying to prove something. We're trying to prove something to everybody else, trying to prove that we're enough. And for me personally, and I think for most people, the place that this tends to manifest the most is in relationships, because nothing is ever more confronting than a relationship with another person, because it oftentimes, if we have not done our healing work, it hits on all of our pain points and all of our triggers and all of our feelings of not being enough. And one of the things that I want to bring to your awareness in this podcast today is exactly that, is an awareness of where are those feelings of not being enough, of not being worthy. Where are those showing up in your life? And you can call it self-esteem, you can call it self-love, you can call it self-confidence. Notice there's a common theme there of self. And it all boils down to your feelings of worth and how worthy you feel. And this can show up around money when we don't feel worthy of earning money, of keeping money, when we don't feel worthy of having a certain lifestyle. And, obviously there are other things that go along with this. There are other neuroassociations that we have, but the fundamental core behind all of it, let's get to the heart of it, is your own feelings of worth. And if you really knew your own value, if you knew, let's say, the value that you added in your job and the true, genuine, heartfelt in your core of who you are, knew the value that you offered, then you would have no qualms about going to your manager or your upper management and saying, hey, here's the value that I bring, and here's the amount I'd like to be compensated in exchange for that. This is if you're, let's say, asking for a raise or something. And I'm not talking about entitlement when I talk about worth, because sometimes I think this gets confused. And I think sometimes people feel that if you value yourself and if you know your own worth, that then somehow there's a connotation that you're cocky or you're entitled. And that's actually the opposite, the dead opposite of it, because people who are acting cocky, and I say acting for a reason, who come across very cocky and who are, blasting their achievements from the rafters in a way that and you can tell underneath, it's really because they're massively insecure, which ultimately insecurity is about not feeling worthy. Because if you felt deeply worthy, then you'd be able to say, hey, I know these are the things that I do really well. And you'd be able to toot your own horn, right, about the things you do well, but you wouldn't feel the need to be flashy about it or to come across as entitled that somehow someone owes you something because of it, because you're so grounded in yourself and you feel so confident in who you are. And so I want to throw out some ways that this shows up, because when you start to, awareness is the key to everything. That's the very first step. When you start to bring awareness to where your own feelings of not being enough show up, then you can start to look at them. Then you can start to do the work and go, ooh, interesting that this is showing up for me. And you can decide whether or not you like the effects of it, whether or not you like the way that you act or the things that you call into your life around that. And it can be not feeling enough at work. It can be feeling a need to people please. If you often hear that, well, I just want to make everybody happy. Okay, you're not going to make everybody happy ever at all. Not everybody's ever going to be happy. But when that's ultimately a sign of you're placing your external worth and value on someone else. And it's dangerous to do that, because ultimately we're giving control away of ourself and our own worth to other people who 99% of the time also haven't done the same work. I remember I used to do this, and I had in some ways such a lack of awareness of what I really was good at. And it was also hard for me to accept when I heard positive things about myself, because if you don't fundamentally believe it, then somebody can tell it to you 99 times a day and it's not going to sink in. But of looking to other people to tell me what was good about me, what did I do well, what were the things that I was good at, tell me why I'm worthy. I cannot tell you the ways that leaves you open to toxicity in all the relationships that you're in, whether it's a relationship with your boss, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a family relationship. It comes down to healing that wound around not being enough. And I do see this show up the most in romantic relationships, because it is where all of our shit comes up, right? And there are usually two ways that this will manifest, is that we will either sabotage the relationship because maybe we're with somebody who really is great, like they really are amazing, and they're an amazing person, and they're accomplished, and they have all these amazing qualities. They treat us really well. They have all the values that we want. They're our ideal partner. But if you fundamentally don't feel that you are worthy of that, you're going to start to self-sabotage. And that's why you hear people say, I don't understand why X, Y, or Z, why I am so awful to him or her, or why I say these things to him or her, or why I push them away. It can often be because we don't feel worthy of it. And we will only allow in that which we believe to really be true. And this comes back to not only identifying when we feel unworthy, but noticing what the belief is behind it. Because if you have a deep belief that you're not worthy, that you're ugly, that you're stupid, that you're insert whatever horrible self-talk track is running in your programming right now, if that's what you deeply believe, then someone coming to you and telling you positive, accurate things about yourself, it's not going to sink in. And I had this conversation the other day with a friend who shared with me, because I do this work and this comes up, and I'm always happy to talk about it because it is something I'm so passionate about. But basically shared with me how abusive she was to herself in terms of her own appearance, and the horrible things she would say to herself in the mirror, and the ways that she would pick her body apart. And really just truly abusive. And I think some of you can relate, whether it's your body, whether it's something internal that, you maybe have been really abusive to yourself. And we were talking about this. And when I looked at this girl and, knowing her, and beauty comes from within, right? And you guys know this because you might see someone who externally looks like they have aesthetically all the parts come together really well. But as you get to know them, their character, the way they act, makes them less attractive, right? Because it really does. Beauty comes from within, and confidence comes from within, and that shines out. But I say that because she was very attractive. She was beautiful externally, but she's beautiful inside as well. And that's what comes out, is her passion and her smile, and her eyes sparkle. And you look at her, and until she had disclosed this to me, I thought, my goodness, she's just so beautiful, and such a sweet, gorgeous soul. What an amazing person. We forget that most of the time, people don't realize how amazing they are. You don't see yourself how other people see you. And when she disclosed to me the pain that she was in around her own self-loathing, and sometimes it does reach that level, right, of self-loathing. And when she disclosed that to me, first of all, I can relate because I've been there. I get it. And she became aware of the fact that, this was her big pain. And I could have sat there, and that's what I told her. I said, I could sit here all day long and tell you how amazing you are, but until you really deeply believe it, it's not going to go in, right? I'm wasting my breath. So let's look at, first of all, we've identified the fact that there's a big pain there for you. You know this now. And now that you have the awareness that you are struggling with your own worth, then let's heal it. Because once you bring awareness to it, then we kind of have a demon that we can see, right? Or a monster we can see. We have something that we can address. And when you say, okay, I see this about myself. Wow, I don't feel enough. I don't feel worthy. This is how it's manifesting. Then you have awareness, and now we can start to shift. And the next step in that, and she asked me, she said, how do I do it? And I said, well, good thing is I do this for a living. So let's talk about how you do it. But the first step is being aware of the fact that it even exists. The second step is saying, I don't want to feel this way anymore. And I'm going to remember how to love myself. And I say remember because all of us came in inherently worthy. And we have forgotten, whether it's conditioning, whether it's programming, whether it's the way we grew up, some kind of trauma or abuse, we've forgotten. And I said that's the other second step, is setting the intention that you're going to heal this, that you are going to believe and fully own that you really are enough and love yourself. And then we close the gap in between. And that takes, again, awareness of when it comes up for you, and start to look for, where do those feelings of not being enough show up for me? Is it, particular events or interactions with people that trigger that for me? If I see someone doing really well, do I feel all of a sudden small rather than feeling excited about that person for what they're doing? Start to look for evidence for where this is showing up for you that you're not enough. And then you start to repattern yourself. And sometimes it's helpful to go back and understand, when was the first time that you felt that? Because sometimes there's information there. And oftentimes people will share with me that it was something about the way they grew up, something about, something a parent said or did or operated or acted, and it was maybe a toxic environment. And so then, okay, so now we know that, and let's accept that that's where it started. And then let's shift that, because now it's causing you a lot of pain, right? And again, in relationship, that's where it shows up. And when you can accept and know that you really are deeply enough, then you know that you're worthy of being with someone who treats you well. And you're not going to sabotage that relationship. And even more so, the other side of the coin is, if you're not sabotaging the relationship, then you're going to stay in an unhealthy relationship because you don't feel worthy and you don't feel enough. And then what happens is that unhealthy relationships keep getting more unhealthy, either with the same person or with new people, until they reach a level of true toxicity where either there's some kind of abuse, whether it's physical, verbal, emotional. There are things that you're tolerating that are extremely painful. This was the way that I came to all of this. Is all of my lessons about my own worth and my own value have come through romantic relationships. And again, not all of them. I've had some really wonderful relationships with men over the years, and I've had some that are, less than awesome. But this is the thing, is that if you're look at the patterns that you're repeating in relationships, because this is a big sign about your own worth and your own value. What are the patterns that you're repeating? Because here's oftentimes what happens. We don't feel enough, right? We're carrying some deep feeling of not being enough, whether you've actually brought awareness to it or not, because most of the time we do these things unconsciously, and that's part of my role here, is to help you bring awareness and conscious awareness to this so that we can start to shift it. But you're going through and you don't feel enough. So when we don't feel enough, we seek externally. That's when we want okay, I'm going to digress for a second. We're biologically wired for partnership. There is nothing wrong with wanting to be with someone. It is a very normal, natural, biological thing to have a partner, right? But where the problem comes in is when we're doing it from an unhealthy place, when we're doing it from a place of neediness and desperation and having to have someone to fill that gap, because if we don't, then that says something about us, and I don't want to be alone. And ultimately, that's what it is really about, is that we don't feel worthy. Because if you really, in your heart of hearts, knew that you were deeply and profoundly worthy, how important would it be to just fill a role with, anybody that is going to serve the role of partner for you, if they're not really the person that's fulfilling and making your life better and you're making theirs better in that way, right? Where it's not a codependent relationship. I heard a coach of mine talk about it as interdependence, which I really loved, where it's not codependence, it's interdependence. We both are whole and healthy and healed. Are we perfect? No, because remember, perfect's not a thing, but we're self-aware, we're independent, and then we come together in interdependence rather than codependence, because otherwise we come from this place of not being enough. And so we seek someone else to fill us up. And so we go out and we get in a relationship, and then we have relationship patterns usually. And usually what happens is we might meet somebody that we really like and things are going really well. And then because we're still playing out in our own way patterns of unworthiness, maybe the relationship ends. Then we continue to, we're telling ourselves a story that we're not enough, right? Then that relationship ends, and we see that, we take that, we make meaning that the evidence of that is that we're still not enough because this person left us. And it must be because I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not thin enough, I'm not whatever enough. And do you see how that perpetuates? And it's not true, but it feels true because that's the wound and the hurt that it's coming from. And so this is where you bring awareness to it. And in unhealthy relationships, when it feels hard to leave, or when you hear of someone taking some kind of abuse, again, whether it's emotional, verbal, physical abuse on some level, so I'm getting into sticky ground here. I don't want to go into domestic violence stuff right now, but I'm just saying in general, when people are actually, no, it is true, because anytime you're accepting any kind of abuse, there's a fundamental feeling of not being worthy and not being enough. Because you protect what you deeply value. But if you're accepting, let's say, verbal abuse, I was in a situation where I basically became the punching bag for someone else's inner demons because my own inner demons had not been healed enough. And so when that person said horrible things to me from his pain and his own insecurity and his own wounding, said horrible things to me, I took it because on some level I felt like I deserved it. And I felt like he was just giving me confirmation that those horrible things I had always thought about myself were true. And so you see how you can stay in those patterns and why it is so vitally important to do the work. And when I say do the work a lot, and I don't mean that to sound heavy, but the healing, right? To heal yourself, to bring awareness to where you don't feel enough and where you don't feel worthy and where you don't feel that you are valuable. Because when you don't feel valuable, there are a myriad of things that are going to be ripple effects from that are going to cause suffering and pain in your life. And so the biggest piece of this is start to bring awareness to where those things are showing up for you. Start to look for patterns. And when you look back at things that have happened in your life, there's usually an area or two, and sometimes it shows up in a lot of different ways, but usually there's an area or two where you've struggled the most. Maybe it's around family. Maybe it's around your money. Maybe it's in your career. Maybe it's in your weight, your health, your, definitely relationships. What are the patterns that are repeating? Because there's information there. What are the thoughts that you repeatedly have about yourself? What are the thoughts that run through your head? What does your inner gremlin voice say about you? Because this is another thing that happens, and I know I've talked about this a little bit before, but we have this self-talk that goes through our head. And the first step is starting to realize that's not actually us. It's all of our insecurity, it's all of our fear, it's all of our feelings of unworthiness that are telling us these horrible things about ourselves. Catch it. Start to bring awareness to it. When it comes up, go, ooh, this is what Jen was talking about. Okay, all right, got it. Interesting that I do that. And start to get curious about it. And again, this is where I say don't shame yourself. Don't judge yourself, because shame is always going to block your healing. You may have been the most abusive person in the world to yourself. Maybe you cut yourself. Maybe you made yourself throw up. Maybe you've hit yourself before. Maybe you have abused your body and your soul in relationships or with drugs or in some kind of other horrible way. Hey, you know what? Start from today. Forgive yourself for anything that you've done, any negative way you've treated yourself, any way you've abused yourself. Forgive yourself for it. Don't keep yourself stuck in shame. And know that you're not alone. Every single person on this planet has struggled with feelings of not being enough and of not being worthy. Everyone has struggled with that. And anybody that tells you they're not or they haven't ever is lying, because you can heal it. I've done massive work to heal my own feelings of value and worthiness. And let me tell you what, it feels so much fucking better than how it felt before. But I still have things that come up, those whispers that come up sometimes. It's the difference is that now they're whispers, and now I know what they are, and it's easy to shift out of them now. But that's the thing, you're not alone. And this is part of what I talked about on my last podcast. I gave the example of the woman in the plane and people that walk around with so much pain. Ultimately, that's what it is. There's something that they don't feel worthy, they don't feel value. When there's pain, and when there's a lot of pain, this is the hurt people that I'll talk about on another podcast. But that's what it is that's why I want you to remember we are all in this human experience together. And there's so many elements that are common to all of us. And this is one of them. And so remember that as you're going through things and as you are working through this, remember, and it helps you be a little bit kinder and nicer to other people too, because you realize a lot of people are all fighting the same battle in their own way, right? Maybe they don't have awareness of it yet, but in the same way. So I want to challenge you as a first step on this to start to bring awareness to where you see these patterns of unworthiness come up for you. Again, whether it's some kind of pattern you're repeating, the evidence is usually when you go, I don't know why I do that. Why do I keep doing that? Usually there's something underneath that, right? That's a piece of information. Look at the patterns you're repeating in relationships, in romantic relationships. Look at the things that you do continually. Look at how you operate with your money. Look at the beliefs and the story that you have around money. Look at the relationship you have with your body. How do you treat your body? How do you treat your physical body? because sometimes it's easier to see manifestations of it in the physical than it is in terms of our inner world. And then look at what is the self-talk that you're using. When you're just idling through the day, when you make a mistake, what's the self-talk that comes up for you? And let's start to look at that and just start to collect information. And we're going to do more. I'm going to do, I say we, I don't know, the royal we, me and what? I don't know, me and the cat maybe. Anyway, I'm going to do more podcasts. We collectively are going to learn together more podcasts on how to actually really move through this and heal this, because there are two different approaches. That's not right. Two different elements to this, where we want to, first of all, heal the pain that's around it for you, heal the wound around it, and then also give you the tools to shift out of suffering in the process. So I look forward to sharing more about this with you guys in future episodes, because this is really, like I said, if I had a magic wand and could give the world one gift, it would be to know, for every person on this planet, to deeply know their own value, to deeply know how special each one of us are. Because when we are healed and in alignment and we know our own worth and our own value, look at how much compassion and love that we can then radiate out to everyone else. And that may sound like a lofty goal, but I don't think so. I think it starts with all of us doing the work. That's all we can control, right? I've said that a million times because it's true. Doing the work on ourselves, healing the things that are hurt within us that cause us to lash out, to react, to stay in unhealthy patterns with other people. Be the pattern interrupt in your life. Choose to deeply believe in advance that you are worthy, because you are. You've just forgotten. And we believe a lot of dumb shit, let's be honest. And we say a lot of stupid shit about ourselves. And we've believed a lot dumber crap. So why don't we choose again? And why don't we choose to believe that we are inherently valuable? Why don't you choose today, even if you don't feel it yet, make a decision and choose to believe that you're worthy just as you are, that you're enough just as you are. Choose to believe it. Shift that belief. And you don't have to have any evidence for it at all. Just choose to believe it. And then we'll start to see how things start to really shift in your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Courage to Rise podcast. Visit my website, couragetorise.com, for more information on one-on-one coaching, group coaching programs, and other upcoming events. Remember, life's too short not to sparkle. Sparkle on.